All right, our question for the day. So Opie here writes that she is into sadism. She's attracted immediately to a man, regardless of other characteristics, if she finds out that they're a sadist. She goes on to give an example of men that she's met that she was initially interested in, only to find them appealing when she learns that they had a sadistic streak to them. She currently has a dominant partner in a kinky context, but then also says that this particular partner is not sadistic. OP then goes on to lament that this criteria of her wanting a sadistic person has her chasing after men who are not otherwise well suited to her, or being unappreciative of the current partner she's in because they are not all that sadistic. So the issue that OP maps out for us, and the way that I'm interpreting this question, is that she seems to believe a person who is sadistic in a kink context must be deeply flawed, and thus inherently would be a bad long-term partner kind of potential. So my thoughts here are that she hasn't fully incorporated her kink for sadism or sadistic behavior in the context of a larger relationship that feels healthy to her. So first of all, is this your understanding as well of the situation? And secondly, how precisely might one be able to incorporate sadism or the desire for sadism in a way that pervades the relationship in and out of the bedroom? And is that even possible in a healthy long-term relationship?
Sure. I interpret the question slightly differently, I would say. So one of the differences in interpretation is, though I think yours is possible as well, we don't know, but another possible interpretation would be that perhaps she is experiencing such a compelling fulfillment from having her masochistic desires met by a sadistic partner that it becomes almost coercive, in the sense of, if this person can meet this need, then my prioritization of other needs starts to drop. And I've experienced this, by the way. So perhaps the reason maybe that I'm leaning towards that interpretation is because I have a very high sex drive, and a very kinky sex drive. And so when I meet a partner, and I have done this many times, as you know, who meets that need, who is able to match my sex drive, who is able to match my kinks, then I end up in a relationship perhaps unfulfilled in other ways, and yet unable to let go because this driving need is being met. So she's pointing specifically at masochism here. I've experienced it more in the general sense of kink and sexuality, but I think many people experience this in other ways. I think there are tons of women out there, for instance, who finally, they feel, meet a partner who is kind, who treats them well, who truly treats them well and values them and is generous and whatever. And then maybe they're not great in bed, or maybe they're not interesting, or maybe these other things are not happening the way they wish they were. And they're saying, well, but he's so kind. And that is such, I just need someone to give me affection, to give me kindness in this way. Maybe the fact that he's not great in bed can be put on the back burner. Maybe the fact that he doesn't make great money can be put on the back, whatever the deal is. Or by contrast, the other way, I think there are women who've grown up in very difficult circumstances where they say, well, he makes a lot of money and he's willing to support me. So then the rest can be put aside because it's hard to find somebody who makes this much money and is willing to take me under their wing, so to speak, financially. So all these different things, we have these needs for some of us, for whatever reason, whether we're coming out of a more financially difficult background, whether we're coming out of a traumatic background, or whether we just have a very high sex drive. Sometimes these needs can be so driving that, yes, you end up being attracted to a partner just because of that, or you put up with a less than ideal relationship because it hits that thing. So she's in a scenario now that's sort of the opposite, where it's the person who grew up financially destitute, who meets a great guy who treats her well, is great in bed, he does all the things, but he's not wealthy. And now that need for financial security is not being met. And I would say that I think that there is a significant limit to the capacity of a relationship to persist if one of these great needs is not being met. If I met a girl, no matter how great she was, no matter how interesting she was, no matter how beautiful she was, if she's not kinky, and I've tried that too, it doesn't last. It's not going to work out because that need is too pervasive. So Unfortunately for OP, I suspect that relationship is on the clock. Now, as far as your interpretation, which I think is also valid or a possible interpretation, and we see this in other ways, is perhaps anyone who is sadistic is inherently, there's something wrong with them. And so even though it meets my sexual need, I also view them negatively and think that they can't be a good partner. And this is a version, actually, of what you might consider the traditional Madonna-Whore complex, except we see it in a woman. So the traditional version, a man says, oh, I want a woman who loves sex, but any woman who loves sex is impure and thus couldn't possibly be a good long-term partner or mother to my child. And so then he marries the woman who's great at sex, because he likes that, but then when she becomes the mother of his child, he can't have sex with her anymore. But her sex drive was high, that's why he liked her. So this is the same version, another version of the same thing, except it's sadism and masochism. And the challenge there is, yes, she has not integrated the shadow. And this is the part that I think so many people get wrong, is in both the case of the traditional Madonna-Whore complex and in the case of this sort of kinky version, they're right. Sex, lust, violence, pain live in the shadow. That there is something wrong with you. There's something wrong with all of us. That's kind of the nature of humanity, because these things are in us. We are not pure creatures in some sort of like idealistic spiritual way. We have lusts and rage and violence inside of us, but those are also the sources of our creativity, the sources of our drives, the sources of some of the most beautiful and amazing things we do if we can integrate them healthily. And so it's a flawed, or not a flawed, it's not a flawed perception, it's a partial perception. Yes, there is something wrong with wanting to be hurt or wanting to hurt your partner. That is also correct. And that's what humanity is made of. And you need to figure out how to put boundaries on that so that it doesn't become abusive, and integrate it into your being so that you can be more fulfilled, aspire to the heights of what you are capable of as a human being. And the same is true for lust in general, for sex in general.
A specific question I have as a follow-up here is specific to the kink of wanting to have a sadist as your dom or wanting to be treated that way. I imagine it would be a bit difficult to negotiate that with somebody who didn't start off that way. So she, for example, is with this partner that she's talking about and is saying that this partners are particularly sadistic. Now, it would be a difficult conversation, not impossible of a conversation, to sit down with this partner and say, hey, listen, you need to treat me more sadistically, or this is not going to work anymore. Because that's a strange conversation to have. And then the practical question becomes that if such a person were to be naturally sadistic, where exactly does that boundary begin and end? Now, it's definitely the case that you could be sadistic inside of the container of a kink session, a play session, and then you close that session and then you just go back to normal non-shadow life. But if you wanted some bleed over, if I want to be a little bit sadistic at breakfast tomorrow, that sort of a thing is difficult to merge. So would you say that specifically with the kink of sadism, is there a unique challenge to incorporating that into non-sex life?
So I think that with so many of these kinks, actually, there's layers and layers to what's going on. So on one layer, there is the sensory aspect of masochism. Many women like to be bitten, to get a hickey. These are common things, but if somebody randomly lurched up onto you in the street and started sucking on your neck hard enough to draw a bruise, it would hurt. It wouldn't be pleasurable, but in the moment it is, and that's because the erotic lens changes your perception of that stimulus. The stimulus is one thing, but the erotic lens shifts your perception of that stimulus to be pleasurable. And so masochism broadly is an extension of that. A simple example is a lot of women may enjoy masturbating with a dildo or having sex, but they don't enjoy having a speculum used at the doctor's office because the perceptual overlay is completely different. One is erotic, one is not. And so the frame you approach something changes a lot of these things. Why am I going into this? Sadism is an interesting thing. So you talk about bleed over. One of the ideas you could engage in is say, okay, the husband or the dominant here is rougher within his treatment of her broadly. Whenever he's giving her affection, he may pat her on the ass now, and then as he incorporates or bleeds over this sadism, that little pat on the ass may become a hard smack. That's a mild sadism that incorporates a bit of bleed. Right now, he reaches behind her and affectionately squeezes her tits as she's whatever. And now you add a little bit and he pinches her nipples. And it's just a flash of pain to bring that sadistic thing in. But it's not just pain and it's not just the pain and the receipt of pain. There's also dominance and submission in a more psychological sense, because now she is in a position where even outside of an explicit erotic frame, she has to accept a painful stimulus, which means to some degree she has to eroticize the rest of her life, the rest of her relationship. She can't confine eroticism to the bedroom, or otherwise that painful stimulus will just be painful. It will not be erotic. So there is a real challenge here for the relationship, which it sounds like she's probably ready for and he's not, which is to, and this is one of the big changes with kink, I would say, is that the whole relationship, day in, day out, you are always having sex. Like the way you hug, the way you kiss, the way you are affectionate, it all becomes eroticized because there is a perceptual overlay shift in the meaning of all of these things. That's the definition I offer in the book, is kink is savoring the intensity of sexuality with a perceptual overlay that allows for an embodied exploration of personal meaning. And that's a lot of words, but what it means is that it pervades everything and you perceive an intense stimulus like pain through a lens of meaning, eroticism, connection, intimacy, that allows you to savor it in a pleasurable way. And so it's a complex thing. It's not just pain and not pain. It's pain plus meaning plus eroticizing the rest of the relationship, plus there's a dominant submissive aspect to giving and receiving pain that's not just about the pain, but it's about the submission to his right to hurt her all the time. Is that, hey, yes, you have the right to cause me pain at any time, at any moment, just because you want to. I find it very hot to just order my girlfriend, come here, spread your legs, lift your skirt, and just slap your pussy. I'm just going to hurt you. I'm going to make you come here just so that I can enjoy hurting you and then send you on your way. And that can be a very erotic thing, but there's a lot more going on there than just the pain.